Hi, and welcome to my Ayurvedic quarantine kitchen. I wanted to welcome you all into my home. Today we are going to be making Kitchari, which is Ayurveda's go-to detox and cleansing food. So when I often think about what it means to detox or what it means to cleanse from other lenses that maybe take into account things like fad dieting, right? Things that are very harsh on the body. I think of juice fasting or I think of water fasting, and at the end of the day, right, these can have some benefit, but when we look at Ayurvedic perspective on these types of cleanses, we actually want to be able to change what we're doing a little bit. So sometimes when we're going to these very harsh cleanses or a very harsh workout routine, for example, while we may just after feel like, oh, like I feel great, during that time we've actually created more stress on our body than we did good. So for example, this might actually help send us into stress response, especially when it comes down to the cellular level, not having the nourishment that you need. So when we perform a detox, when we perform a cleanse, it's actually much deeper really than just sort of cleaning out your cells. You're actually wanting to clean out anything that is stuck and be able to replenish and give new life to what is being born. And so we actually need to take into account both of those things. So when we're just cutting things out, when we're just restricting, when we're just taking nutrition away, what this does, it actually creates more stress response in the body. And so because as we cleanse, it's also recommended to be practicing yoga, be within our spiritual practice, be practicing meditation, going out on walks in nature, spending time with yourself, right? Really renewing and moving into a new season of life, a new cycle with more conscious awareness. We want to be able to do more good than harm. We want to be able to do more to get us out of stress response than to keep us in a stress response. And so instead of creating a stress response, particularly through our digestive system, which is the core of our well-being from the Ayurvedic perspective, we actually want to use our food to abate a stress response. So how is one way we can do this? This is why we work with Kitchari. So Kitchari, if you are not familiar with it, it's essentially a dish that's created with basmati rice. So the base is basmati rice, and because of that, we have a large portion of sweet taste. And so it actually is nourishing to your tissues. It is giving you energy, it is giving you carbohydrates to then fuel the Agni at every single level of your body. As well, rice and its energy is quite easy to digest and quite easy to access. And so we're not making our body have to fight to get to the energy that we're giving it. What is actually going to then give it the detoxing capacity is mung beans. And so mung beans, if you've never seen them, are these beautiful little green beans. Sometimes they're sold split already, so you would essentially just have them split into two down the middle. And with that, this gives us a stringent taste. So this little bean is what actually makes Kitchari so special. Because not only are we having a full carbohydrate that is going to nourish our cells, we're also giving our cells a full protein. So this basically gives us everything in terms of building blocks that the body needs, because we're also cooking it in oil. So from the Western perspective, this has all of the macronutrients that we need. From the Ayurvedic perspective, through the rice, from the sweet taste, we're actually setting off a new building and nourishing, right? As we're cleansing out old from our tissues, we want to then build fresh new tissue. And we need something to actually help us do that. From the Kitchari, from the perspective of the mung beans, this actually helps with the astringent taste. And so it is also tonifying our tissues. Not only is that the work of the protein, but it is the work of the astringent taste itself. It helps absorb fluids, absorb excess fluids, draw out toxins, and as well, from that, tonify the tissues. So this can help tonify the muscles, the smooth muscle tissue of the entire digestive tract, and as well, the tissues throughout our body. So we're having tissues that are once nourished and also tonified. And this, for Ayurveda, it's the best way we can actually move forward. So there's a few things also that we're going to add into our Kitchari today. I've included a type-up about how to create a Kitchari 3 ways. For us today, I'm actually going to prepare a Kitchari very much for myself, And so you can get a sense how to work with Kitchari your own so that you don't just have to follow what my write-up says, you don't just have to follow the textbook, but I actually would invite you to trust your body and to trust your tastes and to know your digestion. So for me, for example, I know that my digestion is much stronger now than it was far in the past. And so I'm actually more willing and able to deal with my flare-ups of Pitta dosha, for example, my Pitta dosha imbalances, instead of just my Vata dosha. So today the Kitchari I'll be making for myself is mostly balancing for Vata dosha, and secondarily we'll be including a little few ingredients to help balance Pitta dosha. So the first thing we're going to start with is the rice. So I've just rinsed that rice. I'm going to be putting my rice into a cooker. I personally like to have my rice already cooked because I don't like very mushy Kitchari. Traditionally you would cook the mung beans and the rice together, but obviously the mung beans need a much longer time to actually fully cook. And so this leaves the rice being very sticky sometimes like porridge, which is maybe what you want. But for me, I just find it more versatile to have my rice already cooked. I like to soak the rice because we forget oftentimes that water is life. And so we can also sort of put our intention for cleansing, for clearing out our fields into the water, let the rice soak in that water. Same thing with the mung beans, letting them soak in water, and when you are going to use them, only using as much as you need. This helps preserve the level of prana of the food as well. So I'll be freshly cooking rice, and then we'll go ahead and move on to creating our spice paste so that we can start to cook down the mung beans. And as the mung beans are cooking down, we'll go ahead and take a look at the rest of the vegetables that I'll be using into this mix. Here's the rice that is the base of Kitchari, and it's also the other component is having these mung beans that I've soaked overnight. I would soak these for at least 3 to 4 hours, and if you can, soak them overnight. For the rice as well, it's something you can soak. It helps sort of open up the plant and open up the prana within the food so that it's more readily accessible to us. Because if you think about every cell in your body, it actually needs that water, and that's how it gets its nutrition, is through the water that flows into your body. So the more readily accessible through water that we make our food, the more that it can do for our bodies. As well, this is why we're working with our spices over here today to boost our Agni. So we'll be creating a spice paste that will be a special blend for Vata and Pitta, but we'll get to that in just a bit. I want to highlight as well that we have the 6 tastes here present for this Kitchari. So we would look at the rice here, sort of as the original sweet taste. As well, I'll be using ghee and I'll be using some coconut oil, which are both sweet tastes. As well, I'll be topping it with some avocado because where I live, there's very fresh, local, seasonal avocados. When we are looking at the mung beans, they have both the sweet taste and the astringent taste, and I'll be including some alfalfa sprouts, which have the astringent taste. So when it comes to the veggies, for the sweet taste, we have sweet potato and also beetroot. So beetroot I included in the recipe for Pitta dosha, but beetroot is really high in beta-carotene. As well are things like dark leafy greens or carrots or sweet potatoes. And beta-carotene is going to really help cleanse the liver and help build and nourish the tissues of the liver, which, especially because we're detoxing, we want to be able to protect and build new tissues in the liver. So we'll have the sweet taste coming not only from the rice and the oil, but as well from sweet potato, from beetroot. When we have the sour taste, I'll be squeezing some lime onto it at the end. For the salty, I'll be using some celery, which naturally has a lot of minerals, a lot of vitamins within it, that helps us retain water, which is the effect of the sweet taste. We'll also be using pink Himalayan salt in this recipe, so that'll be here nearby. You'll also need, for our pungent, we're going to use an onion and garlic. Some people within their yogic paths choose to not eat onion or garlic. They say that it causes the mind to be more rajasic, which would mean that the mind would move quicker and have more attachment to desire. So for this reason, some yogis prefer it out of their recipe because they say that this is not a sattvic food. When we look at other pungents, what we'll be using is ginger, fenugreek, mustard seed, cumin, fennel, and I'll also be including some cardamom, just as well to help balance my pitta. We'll be including cinnamon, black pepper, and turmeric. So this together will be the spice paste that will be all the pungent taste that helps ignite the agni of the food and ignite our own cellular agni, which is going to help us, now that we're talking about how much prana there is in the food, actually be able to digest that prana and bring it into my cell tissue. And finally, for bitter taste, I'll be including some fresh kale. And since we're cooking it down, it's not going to be very difficult to digest for vata, especially because my digestion is much stronger than it once was. But we would still consider that raw kale might be hard to digest for someone with a weak agni. This, I know, is going to be very balancing to any kapha or any pitta I might have in my body, and so I also want to be able to include that in this dish. And in this way, as you can see, I've included all 6 tastes, from the sweet, the sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. So it's always good to have the 6 tastes if you can, but you want to be able to balance and know in what proportions work best for your individual body. That's really the key. What works for you? It's not about what works for someone else. So be able to use these recipes as guidelines, not as a rule book. This is really key for Ayurveda. And if you're going to move forward with Ayurvedic education, know that it is much more about embodiment than it is just about following any recipe. We're first going to prep the rice so that it can cook while we're preparing everything else. So I've soaked this rice, and this is a good step, especially with basmati rice, because you don't actually want to have any of the excess starch. You don't want it to be too overly sticky. But this water you can actually use. So in some countries, they use the water from rice to pour over the plants. I remember when I lived in Indonesia, my host mother would actually always save the rice water, this beautiful milky substance, to nourish her plants. And honestly, she had some of the sweetest mangoes I've ever had, because she would always give this water to her mango trees. So here I'm going to go ahead and put in, I have 2 cups of basmati rice that I had soaking. I'm going to add 2 cups of water, and I'm going to set this to cook. And 2 cups. And since we are going to season this rice later, for now, all I'm going to do is just add in a little bit of salt. We don't want to overdo it on any of the ingredients. And I want this to be able to be as versatile as possible. So to this, I'm just going to add about half a teaspoon of salt. Doesn't need to be excessive. Salt is something in our recipes that, especially within Ayurveda, we often add at the end, because you don't want it to overpower any food, or you don't want to have too much salty taste that's just cooked into the food. So I'm going to turn that on, and we'll get that rice cooking. So if you have an Instant Pot, all I did was hit the rice button, and boop, it's on. It'll be ready in about 15 minutes. So now that the rice is cooking, our next step is going to be to make our spice paste. And you can do this in a blender, but I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way and use my stone mortar and pestle. I'm lucky enough to live here in Mexico, and these are easy to get, but you're also welcome to look for one of these online. This is going to give you as well a lot of potent earth energy with any of the meals you're looking to create. So I personally love when I have the time and the energy to actually work with this beautiful tool, because it's going to help us create a beautiful aromatic spice paste that is going to be the base of then beginning to work with our mung beans. So our first thing that we're going to include is ginger. I have here about 2 inches of fresh ginger, so about a thumb's worth. And this I'm actually going to first peel. And I recommend a great way to peel ginger, if you don't have a peeler even, is actually to use a spoon. And so you can just go ahead and, as you can see, take off just the skin. And you don't have to, when you chop it, for example, when you're using a knife, it's much more difficult to get this thin skin off without taking off more of the meat. I've already started to grind up the ginger just now. If you have fresh turmeric, you can use that. But since I don't have any fresh turmeric right now, I'm actually going to go ahead and use about 2 teaspoons of powdered turmeric, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of fennel, a teaspoon of mustard, a teaspoon of fenugreek, and a teaspoon of cardamom, and lastly, a teaspoon of coriander. And so this is going to be a really nice mix for me, who is mostly Vata, but I've also added in a few extra spices that are also going to be very good for working with Pitta, such as the cardamom and the coriander. I'm going to go ahead and grind all of these up. And as you see, it starts to take on this beautiful consistency of a paste as I start to work all of these ingredients in together and they start to grind down with a bit of that juice from the ginger. As well, this doesn't need to be the perfect paste. This would actually be just a fine consistency to work with. But I would love to go ahead and add a little extra oil. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some coconut oil. And this coconut oil is just going to help kind of emulsify all of these down together as I continue to grind this. And as well, the oil is great because a lot of the benefits of these different herbs are actually much more beneficial once they're in the oil. It becomes actually a cellular transport system to all of our cells because every single cell in your body is lined with a lipid layer. So it's lined with a layer of fat. And so for us who wants to increase sort of that cellular level absorption, and we're working with the intelligence of the cell to know what to absorb, we're actually using this to then take the power of all of these herbs right down to the cells and carry with it all of the nourishment we were hoping for. And as you can see, just adding that bit of oil allowed me to create this really great paste that when we are going to move on to our next step is going to give this kitchari amazing flavor. We'll add in as well just about a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper to activate everything that might be beneficial to us in the turmeric. And also because I am going to work with onion and garlic, I'm going to go ahead and chop up about half of an onion, take off any extra layers of skin that maybe don't look as rich in prana as they do underneath. And as well, I'm going to use about 3 cloves of garlic for this particular batch of kitchari today. To take off the garlic skins, I like to give them a pat with the soft side of the knife. Please be careful if you're going to practice that at home. No need in practicing a whole cleanse and having to nourish your tissues after cutting yourself. So, you see, this way the skin just comes off much easier. Cutting off the end of the roots. And the skin comes off quite easy. Go ahead and give that a chop. So I also went ahead and added the garlic here to the spice paste, and I'm going to grind that up just because we're going to first cook the onions in the oil. We're then going to put in our spice paste with the garlic once ground up, and then we're going to add in the mung beans as our final ingredient here just for now, and then start to cook that down in water. We're going to go ahead and get started here on getting this cooking. First, I'm going to go ahead and light my fire and set it to about high just to get beginning. And I'll go ahead and put a spoonful of ghee. And I'm also going to use a spoonful of coconut oil. So ghee is particularly beneficial for Vata dosha, and coconut oil is particularly beneficial for Pitta dosha. Now that our oil is nice and hot, I'm going to go ahead and add in the onion. I've cooked these now, stirring often for about 3 to 4 minutes, and they're starting to become more translucent, and that's what we want when working with this. because with onions, as we cook them down, they release more of the sweet taste, which you've likely had if you've ever had a caramelized onion. Because as we cook it, it releases the pungent taste into the fire, and it actually develops more of the sweet. The next trick is going to be adding our spice paste. And for that, we actually want the spice paste itself to interact with hot oil. So I'm actually going to, as you can see, make this little space in between. For the moment that I throw the spice paste into the mix, it will actually be able to interact directly with the oil. And this is what's going to give us, as you can see, that color start to move through the oil and really activate all of the power of this spice paste. Now that we have that in there, I'll go ahead and start to give this a stir. You can see the beautiful color that it starts to adopt. This is when you start to know you're working with Kitchari. I'm going to go ahead and keep cooking this for about another 2 minutes, just enough to get the spice paste and the onions fully incorporated with the oil. And then the next thing is going to be to add our mung beans. So this now looks great. I'm going to go ahead and add in 1 cup of mung beans. So these mung beans have already been soaked overnight, and as I mentioned, this is going to be a lot more beneficial to be able to cook these in a quicker time, and as well it helps the plant naturally release any toxins, anything that it may have that are making it more difficult to digest, which is something that particularly beans, if you think about it, they're seeds, are going to be built naturally to be harder to digest. We're also working with mung beans, which in particular have this amazing affinity for being very easy to digest among all of the beans and pulses, the legumes that we have. I also just added a cup, and I'll add 1.5 cups of water so that we can start to cook this down. And while this starts to get back up to temperature, we're going to start by chopping our veggies that we're going to put in here. So we'll be using celery to add in more salty taste, making sure it's rinsed. We'll also be using sweet potato, which we'll skin and peel in just a moment. Some beetroot that I have. Now I'm going to add in all of my chopped up veggies, so the sweet potato, celery, beetroot, and I'm going to go ahead and add the kale that I also roughly chopped. I'll give this a stir to mix all of that in, just a bit. I actually sometimes like to leave the veggies on top as well, so that they actually get a little more steamed. And from this, once this is in here, I'm going to add just a bit more water, about another 1/2 cup. You need to be able to watch your kitchari because those mung beans are going to absorb more liquids and you don't want it to get stuck on the bottom, and so you have to be making sure you're stirring it, and as well that you have enough water. If you can take care of your kitchari, you can take care of yourself. Let me go ahead and give that a lid, and we'll have that cooking for about another 10 or 15 minutes until those veggies get soft. So we've now finished our kitchari. It's come to a great consistency. As you can see, it's thickened up a bit, but it's still not totally paste. If we put the rice in here to cook, as you can see, this also ended up being quite a lot of food. And so when we put the rice in there to cook, all of this kind of becomes one big paste. And so for that reason, I like to separate it because this is so much food. And with the Kitchari mono diet, when we're doing a Kitchari cleanse, we eat Kitchari for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and any snacks for 3 days, around the time of the spring equinox. So because I have so much of this already prepared, and I also have so much rice, I'm going to keep these separate so I can store them separately and then reheat them together. Here the rice is also finished. I'll go ahead and turn the Kitchari off so you can see what I'm going to do next. So within Ayurveda as well, we consider that the approximate amount of food that fits into our stomach is about that measurement of 2 hands cupped together. So I personally like to have bowls that are about that size so that I know what's a good amount for me to eat. Within Ayurveda, we don't want to overeat because we want to leave at least 1/3 of the stomach for food, 1/3 for water, and 1/3 still for air, so that it can actually then interact with our fire and not put it out. So I'm going to go ahead and serve myself how much of this I may want together. And I'll show you 2 ways to prepare this. So for Vata dosha, it's nice to have about 2 portions of rice for every 1 portion of the kitchari, of the mung beans. So of the rice that I have, I just served 2 of those scoops, and then I'm going to go ahead and scoop out 1 nice, beautiful spoon of kitchari. And so that's sort of a general guideline. I'm going to go ahead and put about 2 scoops of this. And as you can see, I have a nice, beautiful big bowl here. One option is to eat it just like this. Go ahead and eat this and have some of this soupy broth with it. And this is one way to eat kitchari. But I know now this is the measurement of food I'm going to eat, and so I'm actually going to give this 1 extra little step. For all of this kitchari that's left over that I'm clearly not going to eat right now, guess what? This might last me several more meals. If I look at that's just 1 spoonful, I've now made myself food for the next couple of days even. And so with that, that allows us to dedicate even more time to our meditation practice, to yoga, to journaling, to relaxing, to going out and going on a walk, going to the beach, whatever you may want to do with your time during the time of your cleanse. Because I want to take this 1 step further, I'm actually going to go ahead and cook down the ingredients of this bowl a little bit more. So that includes the kitchari and the rice that I've already served myself. I'm going to go ahead and toss that in. And as well, I'm going to add another 1/2 cup of water or so. So the point of doing this in particular is actually getting more of that kitchari consistency, where the 2 of these are cooked down together, but without having it all turn to mush all at once, having to store that in my fridge, having to reheat that. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this up thoroughly, and I'm just going to leave this with the lid on for about 5 minutes or so. So our kitchari looks great, it's nice and all cooked together. The rice has incorporated with the rest of the ingredients, but as you can tell, it's not just unappetizing mush. It actually all still has color and consistency, texture. And I found over a few kitchari fasts that honestly this is the way I would like to eat kitchari. When it's just a mush, it's a little hard to get through for 3 days. So I'm gonna go ahead and serve myself a bowl. So I'm gonna add in a few slices of avocado. Add in some cilantro and a squeeze of lime. And so as you may have noticed, I also haven't added salt, which I'm going to add right now. And you want to be able to salt this to taste, so have your salt nearby. And can I just say, this looks so delightful. I am very pleased to be eating this for 3 days. You don't have to eat kitchari for 3 days, obviously. You can also just make this as a nice dish, a way to sort of have some fresh food for maybe a few meals, save yourself some time, save yourself some energy, and actually replenish some energy through this delicious, delightful meal. This looks so good and it smells so great. I'm gonna have to dive in, everyone. All of the spices, the avocado, the lime juice, all just coming together in this delightful dish. And the veggies that are just so cooked down. This is a great dish. So it's not just for cleansing, not just for detoxing. You can do yourself benefit anytime through this amazing Ayurvedic kitchari. And I hope you take impeccable care of yourselves and Equinox blessings. Very happy spring to you and a happy start of a new solar year. Bye for now.